Hi, my name is Brandy Joan, and today we're sewing up my jersey tee pattern. You can get it linked down below in the description, and in this video, I will be showing you how to sew the crew neck and the V-neck version. So I'll put the timestamps below, you can skip ahead, and you're good to go. And that's pretty much it, so let's get to it. Before you do anything, it can be really helpful to look over your instructions. You can print them out or keep them on your phone. That way you can refer back to them easily. And when printing your pattern, you want to print just the first page. Then grab a ruler and check that the test squares at the top of the page measure accurately. Once they do, you're ready to print out the rest of your pattern. And remember, you should be printing your pattern at 100% scale and borderless if you have the option, or as close to the edge of the paper as you can get it. You'll probably notice a slight gap between pages like this. That is totally normal. If you were to draw a line from page to page, you can see everything still matches up, so you're good to go. Now, all you have to do is tape the pages together. There's no need to trim any margins, just line up the edges of each page using the large gray numbers and the diamonds along the edges as your guide. You can find a visual of what the pattern should look like once it's all taped together in your instructions. Then cut along the line that corresponds with your chosen size. You can find the size guide in your instructions and the size key on the first page of your pattern that you printed out. Remember, there are 2 lengths for this pattern and 2 neckline options. You can see here that this is the crew neck and this is the V-neck. So you want to choose which version you're going to sew and then cut along that line and cut the corresponding neckband piece. Once you have all of your pieces cut out, go cut your fabric and I'll meet you back here. First, lay out your upper front and lower front shirt pieces with their right sides facing up. Then flip the upper front shirt down so it's sitting right on top of the lower front piece. You want to line up those straight edges in all of the notches, then pin or clip it in place. Sew them together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. After sewing, press the seam allowance towards the upper front piece, keeping your iron on a low to medium setting. If you're using a knit or a synthetic fabric, make sure to test a scrap piece of fabric first because you don't know how it's going to react to heat, so it's just nice to be extra safe. Now we're going to top stitch right along that seam on the upper front side. Don't forget to switch your machine to your double needle for this step. So about 1/8 of an inch away, just to hold that allowance in place. When you're done, flip it over and check from the right side. It should look smooth and even. And on the wrong side, it should lay nice and flat, like this. Give it another good press and grab your back shirt piece and lay it right on top of the front. With their right sides together, line up the shoulder seams, pin or clip them in place. And we're going to sew straight across both of those shoulder seams using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Try not to stretch the fabric too much, just guide it through gently and let your machine do the work. Now you should have both shoulder seams sewn up like this. So now we're going to open it up and lay it flat so we can press the seam allowance towards the back of the shirt. Then, using our double needle, top stitch 1/8 away from the seam, just like we did with the front shirt. Give it a quick press, make sure everything lays nice and flat, and then set the shirt aside for now. We're going to move on to our neckband. Lay your V neckband onto the table. We're going to fold it in half lengthwise, so the right sides are facing out and the raw edges are touching. Make sure to line up all of the notches and the dot. Then Press it in place to make a clean crease on the lengthwise fold. Next, bring the short ends together to form a V shape. Make sure it's not twisted along the way. Overlap the ends so those dots line up right on top of each other and the raw edges meet along the outer edge. So the folded edge should be all along the inside. Clip them together and then sew along that point where the two bands overlap. Using a 1/4 inch seam allowance and a basting stitch for this will work fine, just make sure that it holds. So once you've sewn that together, it should look like this. All of the raw edges are touching. And as I mentioned before, it is very important that you have all of your markings. It's going to be very helpful when sewing. So if anything's come off, go ahead and remark all of those dots. And it's helpful to do this on both sides of the neckline. So on the front and on the back. Then use your ruler to draw a 1/4 inch seam allowance going down to the dot, extending about 1.5 inches up. Do that on both sides. So you've drawn a V shape. Use your ruler to draw a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Set the neckband aside and bring over your shirt again, and we're going to do the same thing on the front shirt along that V point of the neckline. Again, starting at the dot and extending about 1.5 inches out on both sides, forming a V shape. Now grab an awl, a long pin or needle, and poke it straight through the dot on the neckband, through all of the layers, then through the matching dot on your shirt. This will help keep the points perfectly aligned when sewing, and it's going to make it a lot easier. Now, while keeping the pin in place, rotate the neckband until the raw edges line up with the neckline. On one side, so you'll see here when I'm done rotating, we have one side of the neckband lined up with one side of the neck opening. Just like this, and we're going to pin it in place, and we're going to sew them together just along that guideline that we drew on one side, a little bit inside the seam line. Again, take your time to remark that seam line. Again, take your time to remark that seam line if it's gone away or if it's not dark enough. It is very important and it is going to be so helpful. Bring that over to your sewing machine, and I'm getting in really close so you have a good view of what I'm doing. We're going to start away from the dot. We're going to be sewing from the outside to the center dot, keeping that needle in. It may take a second for you to move everything around, and that is okay. Take your time. Continue sewing all the way down to that point. Make sure that your fabric doesn't bunch up where the two neckband pieces meet, like this. Just raise your presser foot to flatten it out and keep on sewing all the way down to the point. And now we're going to remove our needle, making sure that we're still holding everything in place, and keep sewing until your needle is right on top of the dot. Once your needle is on the dot, leave the needle in through all layers of the fabric and lift your presser foot and grab a small pair of sharp scissors because we're going to make a snip right at the center of that V to the point, but not through the stitch line that we drew. This little cut will help the fabric open up and lay flat around the point while you continue sewing. So we're going to pivot the other side of the neckline so it lines up with the other side of the neck opening. You're mostly moving your neckband when adjusting this, you're mostly moving your neckband, but you may need to move the shirt as well. That is totally normal. As long as you get it to where there's no hidden folds, everything feels nice and flat, you should be good to go. Continue sewing all the way down to the other end of the V. And everything feels nice and flat, you should be good to go, and continue sewing down to the other end of that V. Just make sure that you keep adjusting things so it doesn't bunch up. Give the neckline a good press, especially right at the point where you just sewed the V. Here's a view of what it looks like on the back. You can see that that clip we made helped it open up as we were sewing. So now we can move on to sewing the rest of the neckband by aligning the notches on the shoulder seams and the center back. You may notice that the neckband is smaller than the neck opening, and that is intentional because if they were the same length, the neckband wouldn't lay flat. So again, we're going to clip the shoulder seams, the center back notch, and then we're going to sew that in place with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, making sure all of the raw edges are together and nothing is twisted along the way. And even though I did the final stitch with my serger, I did baste it in place just because I like to know exactly what I'm doing before I chop off the neckband. Now there's only one more step remaining for the neckband. We're going to top stitch 1/8 away from that seam using our twin needle. Make sure to give it a good press before and after sewing so we have a nice crispy neckline. And that is it for the V-neck instructions. I will see you back at the universal steps. If you're here, that means you're sewing the crew neckband. And the first step is to make sure all of your notches are marked. It's going to make things a lot easier while sewing. Starting with the neckband piece, we're going to fold it in half widthwise. Then pin or clip those short ends together and sew it with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you've used a serger, press the seam to one side. If you've used a zigzag stitch, go ahead and trim off that excess seam allowance to reduce bulk. Now fold the neckline in half lengthwise, so those raw edges are touching, and use your iron to press the crease in place. If you need to pin yours first to hold its shape, totally go ahead and do that. As you can see here, I did that. I like that it gives me a crispier neckline. After pressing that crease in place, we're going to bring our shirt back over and we're going to start pinning the neckband to the neckline opening. Starting with the seam on the neckband and the left shoulder, we're going to line those up and pin them together. If you notice that your neckband is slightly smaller than the neck opening, that is to be expected. It's done intentionally because if the neckband was the same size, it wouldn't lay flat. Then pin the next notch to the center front. The next notch is going to be our other shoulder seam. And the final notch will line up with your center back notch. Once everything is pinned in place, bring it over to your sewing machine and sew it with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. When sewing the neckband in place, you want to gently pull on the neckband so it matches up with the neck opening. You don't want to overstretch it, just enough so it lines up correctly. After sewing, give the neckline a good press and top stitch 1/8 away from that seam using your double needle. After sewing, give it one more good press and you're ready to move on to the rest of the shirt. Now that we've sewn our neckband, we're going to go ahead and move on to sewing up the rest of the shirt. So we're going to line up those side seams and pin or clip them in place, repeating this on both sides and sewing them with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now that both of your side seams are sewn up, we're going to press the seam allowance towards the back of the shirt. After you press the seams, set the shirt aside for now and bring your sleeve pieces over. Fold them in half, widthwise, matching up those side seams, and pin or clip them in place. Once they're pinned together, sew them with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. After sewing, press the seams. If you do have a sleeve board, that'll be very useful for this, but it's not necessary. Just give them a good press. Usually we would save hemming the sleeves for last when we hem the rest of the shirt, but we're going to hem them now because it may make things easier if you have appliques on your shirt the way that I do, so just having them be a little bit more flat than they would be sewn into the shirt is going to make that easier. So fold the raw edge up by 1 inch. I'm actually having my double needle sew on either side of the small strip of vinyl that I have, so I'm being very precise, using my seam gauge and clipping everything before I sew it. And once everything is clipped to your liking, sew it down with your double needle. Give that hem a good press. And you can bring your shirt back over and turn it inside out. Then turn each sleeve right side out and slide them into the armhole so the right sides are together. Remember to match all of the notches on the sleeve and make sure the sleeve seam lines up with the shirt's side seam. With everything properly aligned, pin or clip it in place. Here's another angle of what it should look like once it's all pinned together. And now you're ready to sew it with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Everything you've done with one sleeve, you should do with the other. With both sleeves sewn in, the only thing left to do is hem the bottom of the shirt. So fold that up by 1 inch, the same way we did the sleeves. Pin or clip it in place. Sew it down with your double needle. And once you've sewn that hem down, you're done. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you love your shirt, and I will see you next time. And if you enjoyed this pattern, you might like my others. You can check them out on Etsy or my website at the link in the description.